You do this every single time. And it's a fact, and you know it, and I know it.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, I don't hate anybody. I look for grace wherever I can find it. And I certainly don't hate you. My chairman talked about the woolly mammoths in the room, and I'm glad he brought that up. The chairman's immigration bill was negotiated by two members of my party, Senator Langford and Senator McConnell, and I don't speak for either one. They're both good men. The chairman said that the Republicans who negotiated his bill trusted you and wanted you there. And I'm not doubting his word. It gives me no joy to say this, but most Republicans don't trust you. And a vast majority of the American people don't trust you. That's why you've been impeached. Now, my Democratic colleagues are going to try to sweep your impeachment under the rug and violate 200 years of Senate precedent in doing it. I don't think that they will be able to sweep the issue, maybe your impeachment, but not the issue, under a rug as big as the United States of America. Again, it gives me no joy in saying this. I think well more than a majority of the American people think that as a result of your behavior and President Biden's behavior, our southern border is an open, bleeding wound. I think they believe that our southern border is chaotic. I think a vast majority of the American people believe that a lot of it is political. I think a vast majority of the American people believe that it is chaotic by design, and that all of this is intentional. And I think while a vast majority of the American people who don't trust you believe in legal immigration, they don't believe in illegal immigration. And they think you do. And they think President Biden does. And they think that's why the border is open. And they think that your attitude and President Biden's attitude is that while they may be poorer under President Biden, that they're stupid enough to believe you and the president when you say that it's not your problem. I think that needed to be said. Isn't it a fact, Mr. Secretary, that the number of illegal immigrants that you and the president allow into our country counts for congressional district reapportionment?
Senator, I'm not sure I understand your question, but I can surely share with you that I disagree with its phrasing.
Isn't it true, Mr. Secretary, that the number of illegal immigrants that you and President Biden have allowed into our country counts for allocating electoral votes?
Same answer.
Okay. You don't know?
I don't understand your question.
Never crossed your mind?
The notion, Senator, that we intend to allow illegal immigration is nothing short of preposterous.
So you do understand my question?
And if I may, it is disrespectful to the extraordinarily hard work that we perform, and far more importantly, that the personnel in the Department of Homeland Security and across this administration perform to stem illegal immigration, build lawful, safe, and orderly pathways, and invest in a working system. And we only wish that bipartisan legislation, about which I have not heard a critical term,
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, you're
passed.
using up my time. You do this every single time. You do this every single time. And it's a fact, and you know it, and I know it, that the more people you allow into our country illegally, the more people are counted for reapportionment. And the more people that you allow into our country illegally, the more people are counted for allocating electoral votes. Now, maybe that's a coincidence, but that's a fact. And you know that. And you've done nothing for 4 years. Nada. Zero.
absolutely false.
Zilch. And in fact, the only people I know in this country who are better off today than they were 4 years ago are illegal immigrants. And that's as a result of your policy. I don't hate you for it. I don't hate anyone, but that's why you've been impeached. And my colleagues may try to cover it up. They're going to try to cover it up. But they can't cover up the facts. I've gone over my time. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Britt.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Mr. Secretary, one of the criticisms we've heard from you repeatedly when it comes to Title 42 expulsions is that expulsion doesn't result in the delivery of a real consequence in the way that deportations or removals do. And removal is, of course, the ultimate consequence for violating our immigration laws. That being the case, do you agree with me that the approximately 1.3 million illegal aliens in the United States who have received due process and have been given their final orders of removal by an immigration judge should be expeditiously removed from the United States?
Ranking Member Britt, I'm not familiar with the numeric figure that you cite, but an individual who's been provided due process, who has a final order of removal, should be removed from the United States. When we adjudicate the fact that they do not have a lawful basis to remain in the United States, they should be removed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I am so glad we agree on that. Over a 3-year period, the Biden administration has actually removed fewer people in total. So the first 3 years, so not the last 11 months, the first 3 years, removed fewer people in total than both Presidents Obama and Trump removed in each individual year of their administration. So I am hopeful that we can have the appropriate resources there, and we're able to remove the 1.3 million people who have been given due process. And on that note, if you had more ICE officers, more funding for officers there, would that be a helpful tool in being able to remove these individuals that have been given their due process?
2 points, if I may, Ranking Member
Yes.
Britt. In response to your discrete question, the answer is yes. More personnel would assist us, not just the officers and agents themselves, but of course, the support personnel upon which they rely. But with respect to the data that you cite, I should note that we have removed on a monthly basis more aggravated felons resident in the United States unlawfully than in the prior administration on a monthly basis.
Okay, and obviously we're not talking about felons. We're talking about those people who have been given due process and are set to remove. We need to go ahead and remove them because that serves as a deterrent in talking about what we were discussing before. So as you probably are aware, with respect to due process, the Syracuse University found in 2021 approximately 200,000 immigration court cases were dismissed because DHS failed to file a notice to appear with the court. Are you aware that that number is 12 times higher than the number of cases dismissed for the same reason during all the years before FY24 up till FY 2020 combined?
Ranking Member Britt, my understanding is that that number may or may not be accurate, so we are looking into that, number one. Number two, it is not necessarily that the notice to appear was not filed, but the notice to appear might have had a deficiency. That has been an issue for years in the Department of Homeland Security. And in fact, we have used technology to improve the accuracy and correctness of notices to appear.
Good.
And I think we have data with respect to the success of those notices to appear that is more current.
So does DHS intend to reissue the notice to appear in those cases?
Yes, most certainly.
Okay,
It is our
great.
responsibility.
Excellent. All right, there are more than 7 million migrants on that non-detained docket when we were talking about, so double the number at the start of this administration. When you look at that and you look at the record-shattering numbers of people who have entered this country illegally and released into our interior, do you believe that that represents an increased risk to public safety in this country?
I think it is a powerful reflection of an absolutely broken immigration system. And let me share with you data to evidence the fact that this has been years long in the making. In 2010, the average...
I only have a minute and 50 seconds left, so I'm going to have to continue moving on. But I do want to say that ICE has detained more than 32,000 migrants here with criminal convictions and another 11,000 with pending criminal charges. Some of these criminal records, those with criminal records have actually been released by ICE into the United States. And a couple of examples that I want to make sure we get out there. There have been 4,700 with convictions for assault, 450 of whom have been released. There have been 5,200 with convictions for drug crimes, 261 of which have been released. There have been 1,100 with convictions for weapons crimes, 92 of which have been released. There have been 1,200 with convictions for sexual assault, 46 of whom have been released. And there have been 490 with convictions for homicide, 50 of whom have been released. So I am hopeful that we can agree that when we have this type of chaos at our border, that it does increase the risk for our public safety here in the country. And so with my last 42 seconds, I do want to ask you a quick question. When it looks at the CHNV program and what we're seeing, we've got some data that says that DHS approved approximately 97.6% of applications that were received under the CHNV program. And so that approval rate to me is indicative of applicants not receiving that individualized case-by-case consideration that's required by the law. And your response to that, do you feel like there is just a blanket kind of a blanket gift of the CHNV program into the interior, or do you feel like those have been mindfully looked at individually?
Ranking Member Britt, those cases are reviewed on an individualized basis. In response to your earlier point, I look forward to providing you with the data which reflects an increased focus on individuals in the interior of the United States who do not have a lawful basis to stay and who have suffered a criminal conviction, because our success rate is far greater than in the prior administration.
Thank you.
Senator Tester.
Thank you, Senator Murray, and I want to thank you for coming before the committee today, Secretary Mayorkas. Look, all you have to see is what's gone on the southern border, and you know that we're in a situation that needs immediate repair, immediate fixing, immediate overhaul, whatever you want to call it. When I visit with the folks in Montana, look, it's kind of like a Reagan philosophy for them. Legal immigration, they're okay with. Illegal immigration needs to end, and needs to end yesterday. I've made clear that both the President, you, and Congress needs to step up to address this problem in a very proactive way. Should have done it a long time ago. We are seeing a high number of encounters at the southern border. We all talk about fentanyl coming into this country. And quite honestly, all the way up to the northern border, by the way, it's affected Montana in a big, big way. This poison is killing a lot of people. As the chairman of this committee pointed out, a couple of months ago, Congress had its opportunity to do something about the southern border and the northern border, I might add, and Montana being a northern border state, that's important, and I think you know that they'll go to the weakest link in the fence. And Congress decided to play politics with it, and in the last 60 days, I can tell you, the week after we failed to pass that bill, there were at times where 6,500 people were coming across that border, and they could have been stopped if we would have passed this bill, and we chose not to play politics with it. And if you want to see how it's being played politics with, come to Montana and turn on the TV. The fact is the border needs to be fixed, and we need to step up as Congress. The administration needs to step up. You need to step up. And I think if we're able to do that, we can fix it. But it's going to take continual due diligence on the border to make it happen. After Congress missed their opportunity to help fix this problem by changing the asylum rule and bringing technology to the southern border and bringing manpower to the southern border, I called on you and President Biden to use your executive powers to do whatever you could do to secure that border, as many of my colleagues have talked about here. So my question for you is, does the administration have any plans to use any additional executive powers to address the situation at the southern border?
Senator Tester, we continue to consider what additional executive actions we could take that would survive legal scrutiny and have an impact on border security. And I should note that the effort to close the border through executive action is something that the prior administration tried, and they were enjoined from doing so. So the real enduring solution is the bipartisan piece of legislation that was negotiated intensely over several months, but we are and continue to look at what executive actions we can take.
Well, it's apparent the status quo has not worked and is not working currently. And I would also say that this proposal for funding for Homeland Security is inadequate, and we need to work on this. I will say the same thing, by the way, about the Defense Subcommittee budget. It is inadequate. I don't know about the others, but we've got to figure out a way to fix this, because the threats at the southern border and the threats we see in the world through the Defense Committee are entirely connected. And so that if we see folks coming across the border, you know, they aren't necessarily from the countries we assume they're from. We've had folks that potentially could be terrorist threats, and if they get into the country, it's a problem. So I would call on all my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee to work together in a bipartisan way to try to get these budgets up to a point where they really will do the job that the American people expect in the southern border and the northern border, and the Department of Homeland Security, whether it's a hurricane in Louisiana or whether it's people coming across the border, need the resources to get this done. You know, the National Border Council, which represents thousands of Border Patrol agents to keeps our borders safe, they endorsed that bill that the Congress decided to play politics with 2 months ago. It said it would drop illegal border crossings nationwide. It would allow our agents to get back to detecting and apprehending those who want to cross our border illegally and evade apprehension. You talked about the border bill and how important it was to get across. Let's just assume for a second, in an ideal world, that we, as congresspeople, quit taking our instructions from people who want to play politics with policy and actually pass good policy. Is there anything else that needs to be done if we were to pass that border bill that the chairman of this committee and Langford and Sinema negotiated out?
That bipartisan border bill would have been transformative in advancing the security of our border.
Anything else need to be done other than that?
In the immigration system writ large, the legal immigration system, there are many other fixes that need to be made. But from a border security perspective, this was an extraordinary legislative measure. Extraordinary.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few more questions, but we'll present for the record. Thank you. And thanks, Senator Murray.
Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. I, too, am concerned about the border, as we all are. But I'm going to talk to you about that other border that's a little harder to identify, and that's what happens on the waters. I want to talk about the Coast Guard, because I'm concerned about our Coast Guard. We are asking our Coast Guard men and women to do more, to take on more, whether it is trying to intercept across the southern, in the southern waters there, not on land, but in the border areas on our waters. I note in your testimony before the committee today, you don't reference the Coast Guard at all in your oral comments. You do mention in your written testimony the expansion that the Coast Guard presence will take in the Indo-Pacific region. I recognize that, but I will tell you, Mr. Secretary, I worry. I worry about what we are putting on our United States Coast Guard in terms of enhanced mission. In addition to what you want to do in the Indo-Pacific, you've got an Arctic that is wide open and getting wider and more open all the time, and you know that the resources that we have up there to cover that huge expanse are not sufficient. And yet I look at this budget, and I'm not sure who's not advocating for our Coast Guard. Sometimes I think our Coast Guard does not advocate for their budget sufficiently enough. But I am very worried about whether or not the Coast Guard actually even belongs in the Department of Homeland Security. Because as I look at your org chart here, a lot of boxes, and here's the Coast Guard hanging out at the very, very bottom, kind of on its own. And then I look at the budget, and I feel like it's almost orphaned within the department. And our reality is that the priorities just continue. So let me ask about this. We are in a place where, again, the demands are even greater. We did not see the Coast Guard included in the President's border or national security supplemental funding request. That disappoints me a great deal. We have seen the Coast Guard resources basically being cannibalized, for lack of a better word, for funding other agencies within the IHS budget. And then again, the budget anticipates an expanded area of emphasis in the Indo-Pacific. Well, I think the efforts in the Arctic are left languishing. And you know as well as I do the issue with the icebreakers. We were able to prevent another unforced error just a couple weeks ago when it comes to meeting the Arctic commitment by securing funding to procure the commercially available icebreaker. That funding had been taken from us in the prior fiscal year, so we had to fight to keep it in. We were successful with that. But we're looking at the Polar Security Cutter line. Admiral Fagan states that the PSC is the top acquisition priority, and yet the FY25 budget reflects zero funding for the program. In fact, the program received a $150 million rescission. We worked hard to limit that. I appreciate working with the chairman on this. She understands very, very well. But again, we've got FY24 rescission. FY25 would have been the second year in a row for funding on that program that would have been paused. So I would like you to share with the committee whether or not you feel that our Coast Guard is receiving the necessary budget support given the increased operations that they face. And second, if you can speak to the issue of the icebreakers and whether or not the PCS is viewed as a top acquisition priority, and really give it to me a little more broadly. Are the Coast Guard budgets being reduced at DHS level? Because that's how those of us that are following Coast Guard are feeling. So I'm going to let you talk now. I've taken 4 minutes to shape it up for you, but please help me out because I'm worried about our Coast Guard.
Senator Murkowski, I share your concern because, in fact, more and more is being asked of the United States Coast Guard, and remarkably, They perform more and more every single day. As this hearing is proceeding, they are in Baltimore responding to the tragic collapse
Probably
of the bridge.
gonna be in Louisiana,
there.
too.
And they will be there as well, and they were in Hawaii on a search and rescue mission following the tragic fires there. Let me assure you, with respect to your institutional point, I believe very strongly that the United States Coast Guard belongs in the Department of Homeland Security from a mission perspective, number one. Number two, I fight vigorously for the budget for the United States Coast Guard, and I have encouraged the leadership of the Coast Guard across the country, not just in headquarters, for them to fight for the budget as well. I can only echo the concerns that you have expressed, that the Coast Guard is underfunded, and it is specifically underfunded when it comes to execution of the Arctic strategy. Russia has between 30 and 50 vessels capable of navigating through the Arctic region. They vary in capability, but there are 30 strongly capable vessels, and we fight with two antiquated vessels, and yet our Coast Guard personnel work magic with them. I would be eager to work with you to plus up the Coast Guard's budget. We work under statutory caps. There are trade-offs, but I would welcome the opportunity to work with you to increase the Coast Guard's budget quite significantly. And we're incredibly grateful for, I believe it was $140 million to obtain the commercially available icebreaker. That is the tip of the spear of what we need.
Well, it's a gap filler. I'd like to talk to you about the one polar class vessel that is in the water. Apparently, Polar Star has suffered some damage. I just learned about this. I don't know what the status is going to be, but it's a reminder to me that as an Arctic nation, when we have one operational polar class vessel and it doesn't even get to the Arctic, we are woefully behind. Mr. Chairman, I want to work with you on this and what we can do to better help our Coast Guard. I know it's important to you as well.
No, absolutely.